for an end to the Gaza war, given the growing humanitarian crisis and the decision of Prime Minister Netanyahu to extend the military operation, do you have any frustration with his handling of the situation of the war?
No, we're dealing with the whole situation in Gaza. We're getting food to the people of Gaza. It's been a very nasty situation, very nasty fight. We're having some very good talks with Iran. We'll find out whether that means anything, but we're having good talks.
Congratulations. Well, hi everybody. I think that we are on the precipice of sending out a new term sheet that hopefully will be delivered later on today. The President is going to review it, and I have some very good feelings about getting to a long-term resolution, temporary ceasefire, and a long-term resolution, a peaceful resolution of that conflict.
We're doing very well with Iran. I think we're doing very well with Gaza, but we are doing very well with Iran, and I think we're going to see something very sensible, because there are only two outcomes. You know what the two outcomes is: a smart outcome and there's a violent outcome, and I don't think anybody wants to see the second. But I think we've made a lot of progress, and we'll see. You know, they still have to agree to the final stages of a document, but I think you could be very well surprised what happens there, and it'd be a great thing for them. It could have a great country into the future.
Back on Iran, did you warn Prime Minister Netanyahu against taking some sort of actions that could disrupt the talks there in a phone call last week?
Well, I'd like to be honest. Yes, I did. Next question, please.
Looking back on sanctions,
I did, yeah.
If Senate Republicans want to push
It's not a warning. I said I don't think it's appropriate.
What exactly did you tell him? Did you
I just said I don't think it's appropriate. We're having very good discussions with him, and I said I don't think it's appropriate right now, because if we can settle it with a very strong document, very strong, with inspections and no trust. I don't trust anybody. I don't trust anybody. So no trust. I want it very strong, where we can go in with inspectors, we can take whatever we want, we can blow up whatever we want, but nobody getting killed. We can blow up a lab, but nobody's going to be in the lab, as opposed to everybody being in the lab and blowing it up, right? Two ways of doing it. Yeah, I told him this would be inappropriate to do right now, because we're very close to a solution. Now, that could change at any moment, could change with a phone call. But right now, I think they want to make a deal, and if we can make a deal, save a lot of lives.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kirk Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching this stream on YouTube, on Rumble, and on Gun Jin World. Before I start today's analysis about a possible Israeli strike against Iran, I would like to make a disclaimer that on this channel, all the opinions expressed by myself represent me, and all the opinions expressed by other guests do not necessarily reflect my own opinions. On this channel, I host different guests from left to right, from center, from what they call far left, from what they call far right. I don't really play this type of politics. I just host guests to listen, to learn, and sometimes to disagree. Yesterday's live streaming was about South Africa, and I received comments and also a few emails, people telling me that they disagreed with the guest respectfully, and I totally respect that, and therefore I will host again, or I will extend an invitation to another guest, also from South Africa, whose opinions are different from our respected guest who was yesterday on our show, Germ Warfare. Therefore, on this channel, I would like to ask for respect for opinions, and people may have different opinion than yours, some of which are also I disagree with. And in order to balance the narrative about South Africa, which is a very important case, and I do care about South Africa as a country, as a people, therefore I will extend an invitation to another guest who was recommended by our friend from DD Geopolitics in order to shed light on a different perspective about what is going on there. So this is something for you. I trust that the audience of Syriana Analysis are politically mature, and I believe that when they disagree with the guest, they will respectfully disagree with this person and leave a comment in a respectful way. And they are capable of doing their own research and thinking critically about opinions that they disagree with. The intention of this channel is not to propagandize or create narratives, but rather to bring different narratives, different opinions into this public square, which is YouTube, X, Facebook, whatever. And then you can make up your mind. And there are a lot of mainstream arguments and opinions. You can watch them on your TV channels, and then you can come to this alternative TV channel or YouTube channel. And I promised myself that I don't want to create an echo chamber on this channel and repeat the same thoughts of others, or just host guests who repeat the same ideas and the same arguments on all YouTube channels. And this is something that I would like to reiterate, that I would like this channel to be different from other channels. And I'm not speaking about any particular channel. However, there are countless of alternative YouTube channels. They're hosting the same guests. Like there are probably 10 to 15 guests with famous names, and they're being recycled on all these YouTube channels, and they're just repeating the same things over and over again. On this channel, I'm the analyst. I'm the one who wants to analyze difficult geopolitical conflicts. And when I don't know much about the conflict, I will host someone to shed light on this matter. So when somebody speaks about South Africa, I'm an ignorant about South Africa, I will listen to the guest. And then when I receive comments from you, because I truly care about your opinion, when I receive comments and emails telling me that they respectfully disagree and there is another point of view, I will listen to these commentaries, and I will host and I will extend invitation to other experts or other journalists, again from South Africa or from other countries, to shed light on the other side of the story. So let's put this aside. Let's begin our today's stream, which is very important. It seems that Israel is threatening Iran with so-called precision strikes when Trump administration is negotiating with the Iranian side about a possible nuclear deal. In this case, I have read 4 different articles and opinion pieces about this case, and each side is presenting a different opinion about this. I put them all together. I summarize them. I have rewritten them for you so we can reach to a possible conclusion or understanding about the reality of the situation in West Asia, Middle East, and whether Israel will attack Iran or not, and whether Trump will allow Israel to attack Iran or not, and whether or not the US and Israel are playing the good cop and the bad cop, let's say, situation in the region in order to persuade Iran to sign a deal that is favorable for Israel and the United States. So as we speak, we have diplomatic channels, back channels, and these diplomatic back channels are attempting to revive a nuclear agreement between Tehran and Washington. And during this time, it seems that Israel is determined to sabotage any outcome that doesn't involve the total dismantling of Iran's nuclear program. Now, according to the New York Times, they have published a report on the 28th of May, so this is only yesterday. They say that Tel Aviv is preparing for a possible military strike against Iranian nuclear facilities with little warning and no regard for ongoing Armeni-mediated negotiations. Now, in the past, Israel has taken a few military steps, assassinations, strikes, pagers, for example, without the knowledge of the United States, or they have given them very short notice. For example, when they assassinated Nasrallah, they decided to assassinate him. They have located him, and they have sent multiple fighter jets, and they have dropped around 86 tons of explosives. And when the fighter jets were in the skies, they have informed the Americans that they're going to assassinate Nasrallah, well knowing that this type of assassination may have triggered a regional war. So there is the element of that Israel sometimes tries to act independently. However, I would strongly argue and say, without American support, military support, financial support, diplomatic cover, and media cover basically, Israel cannot act independently. Therefore, it is the United States that has a leverage over Israel and not the other way around. This is my belief, and I don't think that Israel is capable of acting independently against Iran without American consent and without American support. Now, Israel may be able to strike Iran, and then these strikes could trigger retaliation against Israel, and this could force the Americans to intervene in this. However, the New York Times, they say that they cited officials, American officials, who were briefed on this matter, and they claim that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is actively threatening to append the talks by striking Iran's main nuclear enrichment facilities. This warning comes as discussions between Iran and the US reportedly begin to yield progress, with Washington's envoy Steve Witkoff and Oman exploring creative compromises to salvage a diplomatic deal. One such proposal includes a multilateral joint venture to produce nuclear fuel involving Iran, Saudi Arabia, and other Arab states with US participation. And this creative idea that they're talking about, they want to create, as it is mentioned, a joint venture with the participation of Saudi Arabia as a balancing power to Iran. And they are maybe thinking of mutual enrichment of uranium with American supervision. So this means if the Iranians agree to this, that the Iranians will not independently enrich uranium, but rather with the participation of Saudi Arabia and the supervision of the United States. And in this case, I believe if that is the case, then the Iranian nuclear enrichment will be strictly used for civilian purposes, and they will not be able to enrich uranium to the extent that could allow them to build a nuclear weapon. And by doing so, Trump and Witkoff, they believe that this could neutralize the threat of Iran in the region and also minimize the regional influence of Iran over the region. However, Israel's posture signals something far more dangerous. The Zionist state is allegedly drawing up a range of military options, from targeted strikes to sustained bombardment against Iranian sites, many of which are located in densely populated urban areas. This isn't posturing, guys. It is an open threat to regional stability and an attempt to force the hand of a US administration now openly split on how to contain Iran. Now, there is another argument that we could raise here, and that is, while the media portrays Trump and Netanyahu as being at odds, with Trump favoring diplomacy and Netanyahu pushing for war, the reality is that both the US and Israel share the same strategic long-term goal, and that is the complete dismantling of the Islamic Republic, a regime that opposes both American hegemony and Israeli expansionism. The alleged disagreement may very well be a psychological operation, which I believe that could be a possibility. And this is a classic good cop and bad cop routine designed to pressure Tehran into capitulation. By presenting Trump as the reasonable dealmaker and Netanyahu as the volatile aggressor, the US seeks to corner Iran into accepting American conditions under the shadow of an imminent Israeli strike that would inevitably drag Washington into another Middle Eastern war. Now, if Iran agrees to a deal that eliminates its nuclear program or the enrichment of the nuclear facilities, this eventually means Iran is already no longer immune against a devastating or an all-out war against them. Iran's position is that we will enrich uranium to the extent that we are capable of building nukes. If we are attacked first, we could change our doctrine. But if Iran agrees to the conditions of the US, it is already, in my opinion, it could be seen as a soft coup inside Iran. So the optics would be different. If the US and Israel go to war, It's a classic US regime change operation, just like it happened in Iraq and Libya, later with different tools against Syria. But with Iran, if they can find a different optics for it, and that is to strip Iran of the elements of the strength of Iran, they could sell this as a soft coup in Iran and the change in the foreign policy and the regional behavior of Iran, especially if Iran and Saudi Arabia start cooperating together in a joint venture to enrich uranium for civilian use under the supervision of the United States. So instead of hitting Iran militarily or economically and create chaos in the region, because remember, Iran has enormous military capabilities and is capable of striking American and Israeli interests in the region and the allies of the United States, right? Like Saudi Arabia. Therefore, the smart thing for the Americans and for the Gulf countries to do is to bring Iran on their side instead of isolating Iran and pushing them on the corner. So this is the creative idea that Witkoff is talking about, and the Saudis are on it. And that's why Saudi Arabia and Iran are holding also bilateral talks, and this is in parallel with the talks between the US and the Iranians in Oman. Now, US President Trump reportedly held a tense phone call with Netanyahu recently. He, as you watched in the video at the beginning of the stream, he said that he told Netanyahu that it is not appropriate to disrupt the US-Iran talks. If this question was about any other country, he would have said a lot of, he would have shown his muscles and how he hanged the phone on Netanyahu or any other leader, and I told him the best words. I told him that we will knock you out, we will do this to you, we will do that to you. But because it's Netanyahu, he just answered with one word, and he said, "I want to be honest with you. Yes, I did." But that's not the warning. It was just I told him it's not appropriate to disrupt the talks between us and the Iranians. Now, Trump, who has long favored hardline rhetoric against Iran, now surprisingly emphasized the possibility of a diplomatic breakthrough, stating that I want a diplomatic solution with the Iranians. I believe in my ability to make a good deal. Netanyahu, for his part, didn't deny that strike plans were in motion and argued to Trump that the time was running out for Israel to act. Now, behind closed doors, Washington understands the stakes. US intelligence doubts that a unilateral Israeli strike would achieve its objectives and fears it would drag the United States into a broader conflict. But Tel Aviv is banking on this very outcome. If Iran retaliates, and it will, rest assured, Israel assumes Washington will have no choice but to join the fray. And what about Tehran? Now, what is the opinion of the Iranian leadership? So the head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, his name is General Hossein Salami. He made the Iranian position very clear this Wednesday. He said, "Our hands are on the trigger. We are waiting. If they make a mistake, they will face responses that will make them forget their past." And I think Iran can retaliate in a very harsh way. But what if, for an argument's sake, I'm just bringing now something different. What if the Iranian strikes, the Israeli strikes were preceded by cyber warfare? I'm sure the Iranians know that this is a possibility, and the Israelis have sabotaged several facilities in Iran in the past, even in the past few weeks, by cyber warfare, right? And recently, we learned that the Syrian army may have disintegrated due to a very sophisticated cyber warfare against the Syrian army. And I'm going to publish this video tonight on Syriana Analysis. I think I have scheduled it at 10 or 11 p.m. Central European time. It is at 11 p.m. Central European time, so at 5 p.m. in Eastern American time. There is a video coming on Syriana Analysis. It's a short video, 3 minutes. You can go and watch it today in the video section, called "Inside the Cyber Operation That Brought Down Syria." So allegedly, there was a very sophisticated cyber operation against the Syrian army in December 2024, which led into the disintegration and complete annihilation of the Syrian army. So this is a possibility that Israelis are very good in cybersecurity, and they could wage this type of operation against Iran to disrupt the energy sector, the health sector, the military, etc. So, and remember, they have done similar cyber operation in Lebanon. They have decapitated the leadership of Hezbollah. They have waged the pagers attack. So don't underestimate the creativity of Israel in striking their enemies. This is the least to say. Now, Israel's fear is that any deal, even an interim one, could allow Iran to retain enrichment capabilities. And of course, this is what the Americans are trying to do, is to allow Iran to enrich uranium to a certain level in cooperation with Saudi Arabia. That's why Netanyahu is moving to undermine the talks before they can bear fruit. Tel Aviv wants Iran's uranium shipped abroad or blended down to unusable levels, which is, in my opinion, a very unrealistic demand. And Tehran is already rejecting that demand. The Israeli leadership knows this and is using it as a pretext to justify military action. Now, the core question is not about uranium percentages or reactor locations. This is in my opinion. It's about who gets to shape the regional order. Israel wants to maintain its nuclear monopoly in the region, while Iran insists on its right to peaceful nuclear energy and regional sovereignty. Caught in between are the Gulf countries. And they're being used basically as bargaining chip by Washington and Tel Aviv alike, which is and they are increasingly aware that escalation could spill into their territories. Therefore, this crisis, in my opinion, is not accidental. It's the product of deliberate policy choices by a government in Tel Aviv led by Benjamin Netanyahu that views peace as a threat to its strategic dominance, and by American politicians too weak or too compromised to resist. Once again, the region stands on the edge of war, not because diplomacy failed, but because diplomacy threatens the interest of those who thrive on perpetual war. The coming days, of course, will determine whether we see a new regional arrangement or a catastrophic military conflagration with consequences far beyond Iran or Israel. Now, I will ask you this question. Do you think that the Americans are playing good cop, bad cop with Netanyahu against Iran? And do you think that the Iranians will agree on a joint venture with Saudi Arabia to enrich uranium together, basically in cooperation with the US? And what is the outcome, do you think, that is the best case scenario for everyone, including the US, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Israel? The worst case scenario is, of course, an all-out war. Everybody knows it. But I want to make a point and say, I don't think that Israel will agree, or Israel will try to sabotage a deal if it's not favorable to them. And this is the dilemma. And the Iranians will not accept a deal that is favorable for Israel. Yes, I know Iran lost many of its regional allies in the past 1.5 years after October 7, but Iran has accumulated enormous military capabilities, and they're capable of striking American, Israeli, and Gulf interests in the region and disrupt the entire global fuel or oil energy supply chains. And that is going to have catastrophic consequences, not only for the Gulf countries, but for the entire world. Therefore, I also believe that Iran has enormous leverage during these negotiations, and they will not accept to capitulation in this case. So let's see. I'm interested in your opinions as well. Now, there are people in the United States whom I believe their loyalty is not for the United States, but rather for Israel. And one of these people is Ben Shapiro. And it seems Ben Shapiro is unhappy with Trump because Trump doesn't want to bomb Iran. Imagine the absurdity of this, that you have an American citizen whose loyalty is for Israel, and he's criticizing the US president for not bombing or being harsher on Iran. This is something that doesn't happen with other countries. Like, imagine if you have someone in the United States, and this someone, he's an American, and his loyalty is to Russia or to China or to Iran. That would be very controversial. Like, there are people in the US who, I believe, they believe in multipolarity, and they wish and hope that Russia and China would form a multipolar world, and they would be more balanced world. And they hope probably for the US empire to demise. But these people will never have mainstream jobs. They will never be invited to universities. They will never go on big podiums and give lectures. And they will not be embraced by the mainstream press. They will not be embraced by the political class and elite and a financial elite there. They will never receive any sponsorships for their shows. Never happen. But people like Ben Shapiro, they do these things. So Ben Shapiro attacked Trump for warning Netanyahu to hold off on strikes against Iran during nuclear negotiations, insisting that Israel can do what it wants, independent of America's diplomatic interests. Israel receives billions in military aid from America annually and a security guarantee, but Ben Shapiro seems to think that this entails nothing on Israel's end. I will play this video, and I want to make a few commentaries on his statements.
So a kind of shocking story from Axios yesterday emerged.
First of all, see how he starts his report of his commentary. Shocking report on Axios, right?
That suggested that President Trump had cautioned Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a phone call last week not to take any action that could jeopardize negotiations between the United States and Iran on a new nuclear deal. Okay, so first of all, I have a question. Israel is not involved in those negotiations. So why should Israel hold off?
Israel should hold off because Israel cannot strike Iran independently. Israel knows this. Without American military support and an aerial bridge to bring air defenses, missiles, fighter jets, ammunition, Israel cannot do it alone. That's why Trump has the leverage over Israel to tell him, to Netanyahu, to hold off. Because if Israel attacks Iran independently, this is what Ben Shapiro wants, right? Let the Israelis act independently. Good, bravo. But that also means that Americans will not intervene if Iran retaliates, or when Iran retaliates, because Iran will certainly retaliate. Is that a good deal, right? Israelis are allowed to act independently and then bear the fruits of acting independently. And when the retaliation comes, then the Americans say, you acted independently. Take care of yourself, right?
Real question. Israel is the country most under threat from Iran, not the United States. Okay, so if we were going to take the full-scale J.D. Vance isolationist realist position, shouldn't the United States just sort of wash its hands and walk away and say,
that's amazing.
Whatever happens, happens?
Yeah, that's amazing, actually. Let the Israelis act alone, and the Americans shouldn't intervene, right?
But I notice that's not what's happening. Instead, these so-called restrainers inside the administration, they're not attempting to restrain the United States, which is already restrained. I promise you, my 100% certitude is that President Trump is not going to authorize a bombing raid on the Iranian nuclear facilities. Whether or not we should, I don't think it's going to happen. Okay, that's just the reality. So why is the restrainer team inside the Trump administration trying to stop Israel from doing that thing?
Because then it means Iran will retaliate, and this will force the United States to intervene. Is this even a question? Sometimes, like I'm sure he's smarter than that, right? But it seems that he's talking to a very dumb audience, or he made his platform grow thanks to dumb people. It's like saying 1 + 1 in politics. Like, this is the basic logic. Why the restrainers in the US administration are pushing Netanyahu to hold off and back off from striking Iran Because first things first, the retaliation is going to be massive and could not be, and could include American interests in the region. And it will disrupt the global energy supply chains, which means the US will suffer, China will suffer, Russia will suffer, India will suffer, Saudi Arabia will suffer, Europe will suffer, everyone will suffer. So Israel can act independently, but the consequences of acting independently is not going to be exclusive to Israel. It's going to be on the world stage. That's why the Americans should intervene and tell Netanyahu to hold off.
Why? With what bad deal? Iran keeps saying openly they will not stop enrichment. And yet, the United States is so desperate for a deal, what, for the sake of a deal? The Iranians know this, which is why they're pushing. And so when Trump warned Netanyahu not to go and do anything about Iran, just trust us. Okay, listen, I will trust that President Trump will cut a good deal if he continues to maintain the Trump 1.0 stance, which is no nuclear enrichment at all, no nuclear facilities at all. That was something that 3 weeks ago the Trump administration was saying. President Trump himself, again, I'm with Trump 1.0 on this, not Steve Witkoff and J.D. Vance 2.0.
I'm also with Trump 1.0, but let's also include Israel into this equation. How about that? Which means Iran will dismantle its nuclear facilities and bring an end to its nuclear enrichment, but Israel has to do the same. But Israel wants to develop nuclear weapons and has between 80 to 300 nuclear warheads and will never join the non-proliferation treaty. And they want for Iran to dismantle the nuclear program completely. So listen to Ben Shapiro, because he represents Netanyahu's talking points here. And that is Iran has to dismantle all of its nuclear program and not join a joint venture with Saudi Arabia with the supervision of the US to develop or enrich uranium together for civilian purposes. So basically, they're asking for Iran capitulation. Logically speaking, do you think that Iran will capitulate? Iran has withstood basically and faced 40 years of isolation, embargo, sanctions, covert operations, destabilizations, color revolutions, etc., etc. Yes, they have lost their regional allies. Their regional allies were degraded, but they have preserved their sovereign decision-making and they have accumulated an enormous military strength. So the question here is it logical to force Iran to capitulate? That requires a war with trillions of dollars against Iran, which the Americans cannot afford. So what is the solution here? I think the middle ground, if the Iranians can join this joint venture with the Saudis, that would be a middle ground. Will the Iranians accept it or not? I don't know. If it's going to be in their favor or not, I don't. They are the one who have to decide this. But if somebody comes like Ben Shapiro, whose affiliations are very clear with the Netanyahu regime, and whose loyalty basically is for Israel, and who supported every war the neocons and the Zionists waged in the region in the past, from Iraq to Afghanistan to Syria to Libya to Lebanon to Palestine, everywhere in the Middle East where there was war, Ben Shapiro was on the side of the war. So he's the last one who should basically give an advice to the U.S. administration, and I'm happy that he doesn't have this type of leverage.
Donald Trump 1.0 killed Qasem Soleimani, destroyed the Iranian economy, and held them in check. Then Joe Biden came in, reversed a bunch of that stuff, and you got October 7th and a vast regional war. Why wouldn't we just go back to Trump 1.0? That is the foreign policy that actually shaped the Abraham Accords. Why is that not the thing? Instead of calling the prime minister of Israel and telling him he needs to restrain himself on Iran.
I mean, how dare him call Benjamin Netanyahu and call for self-restraint? He has to tell Benjamin Netanyahu to go and open World War III in the Middle East and just destroy the region and disrupt all the supply chains, food, medication, fuel, energy, products, goods, everything. These people, in my opinion, should never be in a position to advise on this type of strategic decision making. What they do basically is destruction of entire region, entire nations, killing millions of people, displacing tens of millions of people because of their thirst for war and destruction. Like, they're hateful people. And people like Ben Shapiro are they don't bring anything positive to the table. Like, when you watch him, please try to watch him, by the way, without the volume. You would think that he's a psychopath. And it's not him alone. There is an army of people in the US who told their audience to vote for Trump, and they are very, very loyal to Israel. One of these people is Charlie Kirk, and I'm sure most of you know Charlie Kirk. Charlie, it seems that, or he acts as if he's an asset for for Israel in the US. And he created this poll. He says, if Israel strikes Iranian nuclear sites, what would your reaction be? Should the US continue its funding and support of Israel? So this is his own audience, right? It's on his own page. And this started almost 21 hours ago, and 5 hours left for this voting, right? So 112,000 people, around 113,000 people voted, and 56% of them and above say no support and no money for Israel. 26% say yes, send more money, and 16 or 17% say still support but no money. So even the two yeses here together are below the one that the people chose no support and no money. So the funny thing is that after he posted it, he realized that most people are voting for the no. So he posted a follow-up commentary saying, to be even more clear, if Israel initiates a strike based on solid intel, guys, you remember the solid intel about Iraq? So based on solid intel of an imminent Iran nuke, should US stand behind Israel and vocally support them? If this changes your vote, please reply, I'm curious, and this is a better way to phrase it. Solid intel. You remember the last time the US had a solid intel about Saddam's nuclear weapons? What happened? Yeah, hundreds of thousands of people died. And when I say, guys, that Israel cannot do it alone, I truly mean it. And don't listen to me. Now listen to Saar. Saar is the foreign minister of Israel, right? Gideon Saar. He says arms embargo on Israel will result in the country's destruction. I'm quoting him now. Quote, which states have drawn the necessary conclusions from these remarks and this reality? What is the meaning of actions or remarks by politicians or countries of imposing a weapon embargo on Israel? If these moves succeed, Israel will simply be destroyed. So, Monsieur Ben Shapiro, I agree with you. Let Israel act independently. It is about their security, right? Let them act and let them go and bomb Israel. But then they have to just face the responsibilities of their own actions in the region. Why would the Americans go and fight Israel's war? And why would the Americans fund this war? Because this money is coming from the taxpayer money of the Americans. And you know very well that were it not for the American weapons, ammunition, aerial breach, intelligence support, satellite images, data, cyber operations, etc. in the region, including vetoes in the UN Security Council, diplomatic cover, media apparatuses working day and night on the side of Israel, Israel cannot act independently. They cannot continue a war against Hamas or Hezbollah without American support. So Israel cannot produce enough weapons and ammunition to continue its military hostilities against Gaza and southern Lebanon against Hezbollah. So how are they going to fight a big war against Iran without American support? This is a logical question. And these people do not raise these points because they're manipulating their audience and they're manipulating the religious fanatics in the US, and especially the ones that call themselves the Zionist evangelicals or evangelical Zionists, because this is their audience. But personally, this is my subjective opinion now, I have noticed a big shift in the US public opinion about Israel, and especially among the people who support Trump. There is a big portion of the Trump supporters that I have encountered, at least on social media. I'm not saying so. That's why I said it's subjective opinion. They oppose Netanyahu and they oppose the Zionist state, and they believe that the Zionists have enormous influence over the foreign policy of the United States. Now, I personally disagree with many of Trump supporters who say that it is Israel who is leading the US foreign policy in the region. I believe that Israel is part of the US empire. There might be at some certain intersections or certain files that there are different opinions, but the bigger strategy is the same. Therefore, it is true that AIPAC and the Zionists have enormous influence in the United States. But I do believe that these people are part of the American empire. It's not like they are aliens who came to the United States and they're shaping the foreign policy. No, they are an integral part of the deep state in the United States. And there has been no president or no leadership, no administration in the recent history of the United States that wanted or even tried to distance itself from the Zionist lobby. And they've all benefactors of the Zionist lobby. So these politicians, whether they bought or not, whether they've compromised or not, whether they're doing it on conviction or not, at the end of the day, the reality, the truth of the matter is they're acting in harmony together. And not for the benefit of the Americans, for the benefit of the military-industrial complex, the bankers, the Silicon Valley, and so many other rich people, basically. So this is something that I have been trying to research a little bit lately. And I watched a video of a Chinese businessman. I believe he was talking about the difference between the American democracy and the US democracy. And he was saying China was ruled or is still being ruled by one single party. But in the past 50 years, China has undertaken a bigger change in its domestic and foreign policies and tried different models compared to the US. In the US, we have all these elections and, let's say, liberal democracy, but the policies are still the same, mostly. And in China, it's the same party, but the policy is changing depending on the circumstances. So I just want to thank two of our friends for their generous support. Thank you so much, especially Rami and Memovox for your generous support, guys. As you're watching this stream, I would highly appreciate if you only hit the like button as you're watching this, because it helps this content reach to other people, and also subscribe to Syriana Analysis. We are only 50 subscriptions away from hitting the 100K goal. Now, on the other side, Iranians, they see that Israel may strike them, and therefore Moscow and Tehran ratified. The date is the 28th. So yesterday, Moscow and Tehran ratified Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Treaty. And this happened between the Iranian National Security Secretary, his name is Amir Akbar Ahmadian, and from the other side, his Russian colleague was Sergei Shoigu. Now, what is this strategic comprehensive partnership? This was basically signed on the 17th of January 2025 and now ratified yesterday. It's a 20-year agreement aimed at deepening bilateral cooperations across various sectors, including defense, economy, energy, and technology. Basically, this treaty is significant for Tehran's defense strategy concerning Israel and the United States. So on the defense side, because this is what concerns us today, the treaty outlines plans for joint military exercises, intelligence sharing, and collaboration in counterterrorism and cybersecurity. While it stops short of a mutual defense pact, it commits both nations to refrain from assisting any aggressor against the other. So this is not a defense pact. This is a strategic cooperation deal. This means that Russia will not assist the enemies of Iran if there is any type of attacks against them. And this also means, of course, military cooperation will increase, cybersecurity cooperation will increase, economic cooperation will increase, educational, on all sectors. But this doesn't mean that if there is a war against Iran, that Russia will intervene to help Iran. That's not going to happen. This is not a defense pact. Okay? And to be honest with you, even if it was a defense pact, what does that even mean? There was a defense pact between Syria and Iran. And Syria came under attack recently, and Iran couldn't help Syria. So even if there was a defense pact, that doesn't mean that Russia will intervene to help Iran, because Russia is already involved in a strategic battle in Ukraine. And Russia's hands are full. And it doesn't need a new conflict anywhere, let alone in Iran, because this war is so devastating if it happens. Now, I've been trying to see a few other articles for today to show you. And I came across, since we're speaking about Israel, an article published by Haaretz. 82% of the Jewish Israelis, they support expelling the Gazans. 82%. This is huge. So the Israeli society is So a recent survey of Israeli Jews reveals a growing comfort with the idea of forcibly expelling Palestinians, both from Gaza and from within Israel's borders. So as you may know, you have around 2 million Palestinians living under occupation on Israeli territories, and they support expelling Palestinians both from Gaza and from within Israel's borders, 82%. The poll also found that a significant minority supports the mass killing of civilians in enemy cities captured by the Israeli army. These disturbing trends reflect the radicalization of religious Zionism since Israel's 2005 withdrawal from Gaza and the failure of secular Israeli Jews to articulate a vision that challenges Jewish supremacy. This poll was published by Pennsylvania State University. So, according to the result of this polling, guys, 82% of the respondents supported the expulsion of Gaza's residents, while 56% favored expelling Palestinian citizens of Israel. These figures mark a sharp rise from a 2003 survey in which support for such expulsions stood at 45%. So, in 2003, people who wanted for the Palestinians to be expelled from Gaza were 45%. Now it is 82%. And in 2003, the people who said yes for expelling Palestinians who live in Israel was 31%. It is now 56%. So it's doubled, let's say. Religious interpretations play a key role in shaping these views. Nearly half, 47% of respondents agreed that when conquering an enemy city, Israeli occupation forces should act as the Israelites did in Jericho under Joshua's command, killing all its inhabitants. 65% said they believed in the existence of a modern-day incarnation of Amaleks, the Israelite biblical enemy whom God commanded to wipe out in Deuteronomy 51:19. Among those believers, 93% said the commandments to erase Amalek's memory remain relevant today. So we have this rate of Jewish Israelis supporting the expulsion of Gaza residents. 70% are secular, 91% of them are traditional, and then you have the Orthodox Jews, and then you have the Haredi Jews, 97%. Now, the rate of Jewish Israelis supporting expulsion of Israeli Arabs, which means these 2 million living in Israel. So we have 38% of secular Jews support it, and 65% of traditional Jews support it. And then we have the Orthodox and Haredi Jews between 68% and 91%. Rate of Jewish Israelis believing that all residents of a conquered enemy city should be killed. Imagine. So 31%, 60%, 59%, and 63%. Those are like complete annihilation and killing women, children, men, doesn't matter. And this reminds me actually of the same rhetoric of Jolani's army and their militants and ISIS. What is the difference between this type of talk and the talk of ISIS calling for the annihilation and genocide against religious and ethnic minorities? It's the same, the other side of the same coin, basically. It's this hatred. And this is something that I want to mention today because I believe I have to say it, to be honest. And this is about people who support Jolani, Al-Qaeda, and they live either in Syria or they live in Europe. I truly believe, this is from the bottom of my heart, I believe that these people are very hateful people. And every one of us, when we wake up in the morning, we have an energy that drives us during the day. Some of this energy is about loving something, loving your life, loving your wife, loving your kids, loving your family, loving your relatives and the people around you, and wanting to be productive for them, to give something for them, to take care and care about people, right? This is one part of it. And the other part of it is sometimes it's hatred, sometimes it challenges, sometimes it is people that you have as competitors, but hate is definitely part of it. Sometimes you hate people. I do. I'm not going to come and pretend that I don't hate people. There are people whom I hate. It's normal. People who commit genocide, people who commit atrocities, people who are ruining our lives. Of course, I hate them, right? But these people who support Jolani and Al-Qaeda types, especially in Europe, they come here and they start talking like bad about the indigenous people, original people of these countries, calling them racists, calling them all sorts of names. But they are the biggest racists in the world. I personally, I have never encountered hatred as strong as the hate that I received from the Jolani supporters. Hatred, ethnic-based hatred, sectarian-based hatred. This is classic racism. And they don't see it. They don't realize that they are racists. And they blame Israel. And I blame Israel as well. But I come from a position of someone who understands a little bit, let's say, about geopolitics of the region. And I don't hate against the Jewish people for them being Jew. But these people hate everyone. Hate everyone. And they want to establish a one-color state in Syria. But when, let's say, a nationalist group in the US or in Europe say, okay, Holland or the Netherlands is for the Dutch, Germany is for the Germans, they say, oh my God, look at these Nazis, they are fascists. But you come to Europe and you pretend to be progressive. You're not. But you take advantage of the progressive parties here for your own sake. And then in your own countries, in West Asia or Middle East, for example, in Syria, you want to establish a one-color state. So if there is anyone who is a fascist here, it's these people. I just wanted to make this disclaimer very quickly. Finally, I will just show you a video, guys, because since we're speaking about Palestine and Israel, this is a testimony of an American doctor who returned from the Gaza Strip, and he recounted the horrors of Gaza at the UN Security Council. I think it's worth watching it. Take a look.
In Gaza, I operated in hospitals without sterility, electricity, or anesthetics. Surgeries took place on crowded and filthy floors. Children died not because their injuries were unsurvivable, but because we lacked blood, antibiotics, and the most basic supplies that are readily available in any large hospital anywhere else in the world. I did not see or treat a single combatant during my 5 weeks in Gaza. My patients were 6-year-olds with shrapnels in their heart and bullets in their brains, and pregnant women whose pelvises had been obliterated and their fetuses cut in two while still in the womb. Mothers sheltering in the hospital cooked bread on hot plates in the emergency department during mass casualty events, as we dealt with the rain of fire and death falling around us everywhere. On March 18th, the ceasefire was violated by Israel. That day, I witnessed the most extreme mass casualty event of my career at Nasser Medical Complex. 221 trauma patients arrived in one morning. 90 were dead on arrival, nearly half were severely injured children. No health system on earth could cope with this, least of all one that is besieged and starved of supplies. Hospitals are meant to be sanctuaries. Healthcare workers and first responders are supposed to be protected. Children are supposed to be protected. In Gaza, these protections are simply gone. Every day, the distinction between combatant and civilian is erased. Most of my patients were preteen children, their bodies shattered by explosives and torn by flying metal. Many died. Those who lived often awoke to find their entire families gone. According to the War Child Alliance, nearly half of Gaza's children are suicidal. They ask, why didn't I die with my sister, my mother, my father? Not out of extremism, but out of unbearable grief. I wonder if any member of this council has ever met a 5-year-old child who no longer wants to live. Let alone imagined a society in which so many young children feel this way. And what astonishes me is not that some children in Gaza have lost the will to live, but that any still cling to hope. My Palestinian friends, mostly healthcare workers, no longer speak of resilience or even survival. Parents memorize their children's clothing in case they must identify their remains later. They pray for one piece of bread to give them before they sleep, so that their children might die less hungry if they are killed at night. I urge the Council, and especially my own government, to act with urgency on these enforceable measures. 1. Demand an immediate and permanent ceasefire, including a halt to all arms transfers to all parties to the conflict, alongside targeted and lawful sanctions on Israel. 2. Demand the reopening of all of Gaza's crossings and guarantee unrestricted medical evacuations, including to hospitals in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, where Palestinian patients can be treated by Palestinian doctors, with safe return to Gaza assured. 3. Guarantee sustained humanitarian access throughout Gaza, allowing all essential supplies, shelter, food, water, fuel, and medical supplies, to reach all people in need. 4. Strongly and explicitly reject the weaponization and politicization of aid embodied by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, whose executive director, a veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps, publicly resigned on Sunday, citing the foundation's lack of adherence to humanitarian principles. 5. The immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. 6. The immediate and unconditional release of all healthcare workers, including Dr. Hussam Abu Sufia, now held in Israeli detention for more than 150 days. If this continues, there will be no Palestinian doctors left, no one to care for the sick and wounded. There will be no Palestinians left to rebuild the healthcare system. We are losing a generation before our eyes, condemning people to die of hunger, disease, and despair, deaths that could be easily prevented.
the images of mothers embracing their motionless bodies, caressing their hair, talking to them, apologizing to them. It's unbearable. How could anyone tolerate this horror? Excuse me, Mr. President. I have grandchildren. I know what they mean to their families. And to see the situation of the Palestinians without us having hearts to do something is beyond the ability of any normal human being to tolerate. Flames and hunger are devouring Palestinian children. This is why we are so outraged as Palestinians everywhere, the 14 millions of us, in the occupied territories, in the diaspora, in the refugee camps, in far places, all the way to California and in between. We love our children. We love our people. We don't want to see them going through this.
So, I will just respond to one of the comments here. And somebody says this is a propaganda. Anyways, WUB. I would just wish you one thing. I wish you the same thing that you wish for others, and especially for the Palestinians. How about that? I think that would be great. I've been your host, Kirk Almassian of Syriana Analysis. Thank you very much, guys, for tuning in to today's live streaming. I will come back to you tomorrow at 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time with Dr. Tarek Jibril Ammar. As you may know, we do weekly podcast with him about the global geopolitical issues, and with particular focus on the relationship between the US, Russia, China, and Europe, multipolarity and unipolarity. So make sure to tune in tomorrow at the same time. And if you like to support this stream, the easy thing to do is just hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Let's hit the 100K by tomorrow. That would be great. And if you like to support my independent work, you can become a patron, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. If you don't like to use Patreon, there are different other means in the description below. And tonight we are going to, of course, I'm going to post this video at 11 p.m. Central European Time, which is 5 p.m. Eastern American Time. This video is about inside the cyber operation that brought down Syria. It's only 3-minute video, very fast. You can click on notify me here so that you don't miss this video. It's going to be published very soon. So, peace be upon you guys and upon your families. Salam.